brought another group of people who took that promise seriously. And because they did that, because they accepted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promise to them and followed through with His commands, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed them to win against impossible odds, to defeat an invincible enemy. Despite the odds, because they believed in Allah's promise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them that victory. Who are these people? This story takes place in the land of Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free it. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Ma'idah, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ اذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ جَعَلَ فِيكُمْ أَنْبِيَاءَ وَجَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا وآتاكم ما لم يؤت أحدا من العالمين يا قوم ادخلوا الأرض المقدسة التي كتب الله لكم ولا ترتدوا على أدباركم فتنقلبوا خاسرين. Allah tells us the story of Musa alayhi salam when he says to his people, O my people, remember Allah's blessing that He has given you. When He has given you prophet after prophet, a prophet would die and Allah would send them another prophet, and he would die and they would send them another prophet. Remember that blessing, my people. And remember that Allah gave you sovereignty and power and made kings from amongst you and gave you what He has not given anyone else in this world. He says, O my people, enter al-ard al-muqaddasa. This is after they left Egypt. Musa alayhi salam says, O my people, remember these blessings and enter al-Bayt al-Maqdis. Bayt al-Maqdis, enter the Holy Land. Allah has written it for you. Allah has promised victory to you. And do not turn back or you will be losers. قالوا يا موسى إن فيها قوما جبارين وإنا لن ندخلها حتى يخرجوا منها فإن يخرجوا منها فإنا داخلون. They said, O Musa, we will never enter that city. Inside of that city are very strong people. They are invincible. They are extremely strong. We will never enter that city unless they come out themselves. Allah says, قال رجلان من الذين يخافون أنعم الله عليهم ادخلوا عليهم الباب فإذا دخلتموه فإنكم غالبون وعلى الله فتوكلوا إن كنتم مؤمنين. Allah says 2 men stood up from Bani Israel. Out of how many? The scholars, they say that Bani Israel, when they left, they were 600,000 people. After all of those years of suffering in the hands of Pharaoh, decades of occupation and oppression, decades of being killed by Pharaoh, their babies being slaughtered in front of their eyes. They saw miracle after miracle in front of their eyes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed them miracles in front of their eyes in the hands of Musa alayhi salam and Aaron and Harun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in front of their own eyes drowned Pharaoh in the sea. After seeing all of those things, despite all of those things, despite Allah promising them victory, if you enter into the city, you will be victorious. Out of all of those 600,000, only 2 men stand up. And they say, because they recognize the blessings. They realize, Musa alayhi salam just told them, اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم, remember Allah's blessings. They realize that those blessings, they come at a cost. Those blessings are not free. There is a price you have to pay for that blessings. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you blessings, you have to pay it forth. When Allah gives you a blessing and He commands you, you are liable, you are responsible. You have to pay it forth. That blessing does not come cheap and it doesn't come free. It comes at a cost. They recognize this price. And so they stood up. Out of all of these 600,000 people, 2 men stand up and they say, they put their trust in Allah and they say, Ya qawm idkhulu alayhim al-bab. Our people, just go forth. Just walk into the city. Just march into the city. Allah has promised you victory. You just have to move forward and go in. Just put your trust in Allah. Rely on Allah. Have tawakkul if you are truly believers. قالوا يا موسى إنا لن ندخلها أبدا ما داموا فيها فاذهب أنت وربك فقاتلا إنا هاهنا قاعدون. They said, "O Musa, we will never enter that city." In response to Musa alayhi salam, in response to the two men who are telling them to go forward, in response to Allah's promise of victory, they say, "O Musa, we will never go forward. So you and your Lord go and fight, and we will wait right here." And so Musa alayhi salam, he turns to Allah and he says, قال رب إني لا أملك إلا نفسي وأخي فافرق بيننا وبين القوم الفاسقين. He says, "Oh Allah," he begs Allah. He says, "Oh Allah, I have no control over anyone else. I have no power. I have no authority to do anything. I only have control over myself and my brother. And so Allah, you be the judge and set us apart from a defiant, disobedient people. Don't count us as the same, O Allah." And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds, قال فإنها محرمة عليهم 40 سنة يتيهون فلا تأس على القوم الفاسقين. Allah replies, فإنها محرمة عليهم. You don't want to go in? It is haram for you to go to that city now. He says, it is haram, that city, Baytul Maqdis, Jerusalem, is haram for them. They will never enter that city now. يتيهون 40 سنة يتيهون. And Allah says, for the next 40 years, you will wander through the land. You will wander through the desert, anxious, broken, lost, purposeless, aimless. So do not grieve. He's telling Musa, don't grieve over these people. They chose this. They chose to be defiant and disobedient. Don't grieve over them. And so for the next 40 years, the Bani Israel, they would not be able to settle. They would go from city to city, from land to land. And every time they tried to build something, every time they tried to settle down, every time they tried to make something their home, Allah destroyed it and made them go back to zero. They were unable to ever step foot in that city again. It was that one moment of disobedience, that one moment that they were required to make a stand. Because they did not stand in that one moment, Allah punished them for 40 years and kept them out of that land and never allowed them to step foot in that land again. Allah abandoned them. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the yaqeen, the conviction that allows us to believe in His promises and allows us and gives us the success to follow His commands. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. عباد الله اتقوا الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل فقد أمرنا الله تعالى بذلك فقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. What is the relevance of this story, this specific story, brothers and sisters? I want to focus on 3 points regarding this specific incident. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Bani Israel, when He told the children of Israel that you will no longer be able to enter that land, when He told them that for 40 years you will wander the desert, what do you think their response was to Musa? What do you think they said? They all backtracked. They said, no, we will go now. We will go forward. We go back on what we said. We will go and fight. We will we will roll up our sleeves and we will go fight now. We will enter the city. We will do what we were supposed to do. And Allah said, no. Musa told them that if you enter the city now, you will be annihilated. You will be destroyed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not keep that promise He gave you. That train has left the station. It will not come back. That deal is off the table. There is no more deal. There is no more promise. If you enter now, you will be annihilated. You will be destroyed. It is no longer there. And so for the next 40 years, they wandered that desert. 599,998 of them died in that desert. They never found a land. They never found a city. They never found a village. And they've never found a home. 998,000 of them died. But the two men who stood up, those two men that stood up and warned them and recognized Allah's bounty, they lived. And they lived to see the next generation who entered Jerusalem. And they fought side by side with the next generation who entered Bayt al-Maqdis. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept them around to see the victory. Be those two people. Don't be like the rest of the people. Be those two men. When everyone else says, raising your voice doesn't make a difference, speaking about Palestine doesn't make a difference, going to the protest doesn't make a difference, boycotting is not going to do anything, posting online, speaking to people is not going to do anything. Make a difference and be those two men. Stand up and say something, do something. Because despite how dark the situation looks, despite how difficult the situation looks, if you stand up at this moment, Allah will keep you around to see the day when victory comes. When those two men stood up, Allah allowed the rest of Bani Israel to die, but He kept them. Because they were truthful in their promise. And so Allah was truthful in His promise and He kept them to see the day of victory. The second point I want us to focus on is that these 40 years were not purposeless. Allah did not just choose 40 years for no reason. There was a reason for 40 years. Allah decreed that they wander the desert for 40 years so that their children, so those children would ask them, why don't we have a home? Why don't we have a city? Why don't we have a place where we can settle and relax? Why are we at the mercy of the climate? Why are we at the mercy of the desert? Why don't we have a home? And every time they asked that question, the response was, you are in this situation because of your fathers and your mothers who did not do anything. When Allah told your parents to enter the city, they did not enter, and that is why you are in this situation. And so ingrained in the mind of those children that we are tired of this desert. We are tired of being in this place, and we will never do the same thing that our parents did. And that is what we see in Gaza. That the people of Gaza are being forged by fire. When you put steel inside of fire, you temper that steel. That steel becomes stronger than when you had put it in. And they are being forged. They are being molded. Allah is making them resilient for what is to come. They will not be tempted by the dunya because they don't have the dunya. They will not falter when it is time to stand up and speak truth, when it is time to sacrifice their life, their wealth, their families. They will be ready because they have nothing except Allah. They have nothing except for their faith. And so Allah is preparing them. They will not be a large number. There's going to be a lot of people around the world. There's going to be Muslim leaders around the world who are sitting on their chairs, who will say, what are you doing? This is not going to do anything. You're doing the wrong thing. But none of that will matter because they are coming out of a desert. They are coming out of a desert that they have been in for decades. For years and years, they are sick of being in the desert. And so when the time comes and the rest of the ummah is still in that desert, they will be the ones looking at the desert and saying, we are coming out. We are leaving this desert by any means necessary. The last point is that it was not 500 years. It was not 1,000 years. It was not 200 years. It was only 40 years. What is the significance of 40 years? One generation. Allah rid them of one generation, and He brought a generation who was tired of the desert, who was tired of being oppressed, who was tired of being occupied. And today we are seeing a generation who are being born in Palestine, who will come out of the struggle and the occupation and the oppression, and Allah is forging them. The steel that comes out will be a tempered steel. It'll be a strong steel. It will be a resilient steel that cannot be broken. The rest of the ummah at that point will be irrelevant, because they will have full conviction moving forward. That is what is happening in Palestine. This is the factory that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is producing men and women in, who will take that promise and fulfill that promise. Musa alayhi salam, Harun alayhi salam, in this 40 years, they died in those 40 years. They never saw Baytul Maqdis. They never entered. They never were part of that army. They wandered in that desert with their people. Musa alayhi salam died before that happened. But when his time came, we know that the Prophet ﷺ tells us that the angels, they come to the prophets and they tell them, it is your time. Unlike us, we have no choice. But the angels, they come to the prophets and they tell them, it is your time. And so the angel of death came to Musa, and out of his surprise, he hit the angel of death. He struck him. And so the angel of death went back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he said, you sent me to a slave who hates death, who does not want to die. And so he says, go back to Musa and tell him, فَقُلْ لَهُ يَضَعُ يَدَهُ عَلَى مَتْنِ ثَوْرٍ فَلَهُ بِمَا غَضَتْ يَدُهُ بِكُلِّ شَعْرَةٍ سَنَةٍ. Tell Musa, O Musa, put your hand on the loins, on the back of an ox. And for every hair that is on the back of that ox, you will be given an extra year to live. ثُمَّ مَاذَا? Then what, O Allah? ثُمَّ الْمَوْتِ. Then you will die, O Musa. So Musa says, الآن. I'll rather take it now. Everyone must go, I'll take it now. And then he said, فَسَأَلَ اللَّهِ أَن يُدْنِيَهُ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ الْمُقَدَّسَةِ رَمْيَةً بِحَجَرٍ. But he said, oh Allah, if it is that I must die now, if it is that I will not see the victory of Baytul Maqdis, if it is that I will not see Jerusalem, then allow me to be carried and buried close to Jerusalem, a stone's throw away. Allow me to be as close as I can be. Allow me to see Bayt al-Maqdis. I accept that I will not enter, but allow me to see it. Allow me to smell its air. Allow me to be buried next to it. Oh Allah. And so the angels, they did that. When he learned that he will not be there when Bayt al-Maqdis will be conquered, he was not satisfied, Musa alayhi salam. It was not enough for him. He wanted to be as close as possible. These bodies, these bones, this money, these families, brothers and sisters, is a small price to pay for Bayt al-Maqdis. Your job, you're scared to speak. You're scared to say something. You're scared to rally. You're scared to go behind the cause. Wallahi, it is a cheap price to pay. Don't be afraid. He didn't die. He died and he did not see that victory, but he was buried close to Bayt al-Maqdis. He was taken by the angels close. We have two options. Brothers and sisters, we have two options. One option is that we can be that losing generation that is squished between what was and what will be. People will forget about us. The history books will forget this period, will forget you and me. They will never mention us. We can be that generation. Or we can be that generation that lays the foundation for the generation to come who will enter Bayt al-Maqdis. We can be that generation that paves the way for those who are to come, who will liberate Palestine, who will liberate Jerusalem. The ball is in your court. Will you throw that small stone? Are you going to do that small effort? Musa alayhi salam could do nothing. All he could do is ask, oh Allah, allow me to be as close as I could to Jerusalem. What is that little you're going to do? What is that effort that you're going to make so that you can be part of that story, so that you can be part of that success and that promise? Because that promise will come, that those children walking in the desert will come out of that desert and enter into that city one day. How will you be part of that story? That is a question you need to ask yourself on this blessed day of Jumu'ah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to inspire us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us conviction in His promise. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us yaqeen in His promise. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us patience and to give us steadfastness for what is to come. What is to come is more than what has passed. And so be ready and be steadfast and be patient. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu isbiru wa sabiru wa rabithu. O you who believe, be patient and be steadfast and be strong and be ready. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this blessed day of Friday to give relief to our brothers and sisters in Gaza and to our brothers and sisters in Palestine as a whole. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free Palestine and to allow us to see a free Palestine. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us a day where we see Jerusalem return to the hands of the believers. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help His oppressed slaves wherever they may be, in Gaza, in Palestine, in the West Bank, in China, in Sudan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be with them and to help their cause and to be with the oppressed and to tie our hearts with steadfastness and patience for what is to come. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على نبينا وشفيعنا محمد. قوموا إلى صلاتكم يرحمكم الله. The brothers asked me before we stand for prayer to make a small appeal for Quran Academy for Young Scholars. This is an institution in New York that focuses on raising the next generation. When we speak about the next generation, what are we doing to build that next generation? What are the tools that we are giving them? What is the knowledge we are giving them? What is the identity that we are giving them so that they can carry on this legacy and to be from the generation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives victory to? So this is a small appeal. Inshallah, they will raise some funds after the salah. Jazakumullah khairan. Qumu ila salatikum yarhamukumullah.